Hi, welcome to the Proactive Messages in Microsoft Teams Bots video. In this video, we will illustrate some of the concepts that you will need to leverage to be able to send proactive messages from a JavaScript or TypeScript bot application in Microsoft Teams. In today's agenda, we are going to cover the following topics. Understand how to, from a context, which means from a user-initiated interaction, be able to create a channel conversation, like it's done in the FAQ Plus bot. Continue a user conversation, again, as is done in the FAQ Plus bot to notify user about updates. From channel data, such as from your own API, when you want to notify a channel, but apart from a webhook, you want also your bot to be able to connect and receive user actions and responses on messages and cards you send to a channel, and also be able to create or continue a user conversation which was initiated directly from the bot to a user without further direction. And we are also going to share some of the best practices when it comes to proactive messages. So without further ado, let's jump into the demo about how to create a channel conversation and continue a user conversation from context. All right, so for the first part of this demo, I'm going to show you how you can create a proactive message from a user-initiated conversation. So right here, I have my bot already configured, which was created using the Yeoman Microsoft Teams generator that can be used not only to create bots, but also tabs, message extensions, and connectors. So right here, what I did was to create a connector client, which is initiated with my constructor, which will basically configure the adapter and trust the service URL, which is critical to authorize my bot to be able to send proactive messages as part of this conversation flow we are configuring. In addition here, I have also initiated a connector client, which will be used again against this service URL to send proactive messages from this channel. So in a one-on-one context conversation, if a user sends this text, send user to the bot, this method will be called, which as I have configured requires the message and the ID from a user, which I will show you in another demo how you can configure to retrieve to be used later. And basically what this method will do, it will initiate a new message based on the content which was sent to the method, initiate some conversation parameters, specifying what is the tenant and what is the member, which should receive the message from the bot. And based on these parameters and the connector client configured previously, create a conversation and then send the message, the activity in this context, to this conversation. So that's an important step required for one-on-one proactive messages. You first need to create a conversation to then send an activity to this conversation. So I got my bot here already running. And from the bot conversation, if I type and send user, the bot should call the connector client and send the message I configured to the user. Now for the second part of this demo, I have created a similar method called sendChannel, which requires only the text from the the user to the bot again, and again we'll initiate a message, a conversation parameter. As you can see, the conversation parameter is different when you want to send a proactive message to a channel rather than to a user directly, such as in here we specify the channel ID, which can be obtained when the bot is installed in a channel, or maybe when you can manually configure that in your own storage based on the get link to the channel, which you can configure from the Teams client. And here another difference is that the activity, which in this case is this message, but could also be a card, is included as part of the conversation parameter. So right here, I'm going to again leverage my connector client to create a new conversation. And now I'm going to include the activity, so there's no need to send to the conversation as well. And in addition, for this demo, I have also shown here how you can write down the response, and based on the response.id, use the connector client again to send to this conversation ID another activity, therefore being able to send a reply to a channel thread. So from the bot, if I type in send channel, if everything goes as expected, the bot will process the activity, send it to a channel. And as you can see here in the channel, we already got the proactive message, which was initiated by the bot creating a new thread, and also the reply. And you can use this again to create another replies based on the message.id, which is the conversation ID of this top channel thread messages. So as you can see, if your bot is installed for a user and or a channel, you will be able to handle these conversations. Now for the creating a channel and user conversation from channel data, we'll need to build the parameters based on previous information. So first, you need to initiate an adapter if not done that already. And it's also required to trust the service URL so that your bot can be authorized to send messages to the user or the channel, proactive messages. So basically, I have this route which I'm using to get a parameter and build a new message, construct a new conversation parameter as we did previously, initiate an adapter and connect this adapter to the service URL, and then send this conversation parameter to the appropriate channel. So for that, I'm gonna go to Postman and send the parameter name to my endpoint. And when I do that, I receive the confirmation that the message was sent successfully. And if we move to the channel, there is my message, which was sent from the bot to them. Again, it could be a card as well, not just messages. So that's basically the scenario you need to accomplish. And in case you want to send a message to a user, you need the tenant ID, the bot ID, and the bot's name. and also information about the user, which in this case is their ID and name. And in the next demo, I'm going to show you a better approach you can follow to obtain this information. With that, you can build a new conversation parameter, connect the client as we did previously, and you will create a new conversation and send this activity to this conversation. That's the main difference when you want to send a user proactive message from scratch. You need to first build the conversation and then send the message, which is different from the channel. So in this case, when I call this endpoint, if everything runs as expected, I'm going to receive my confirmation, and then the user will have received my proactive message from the bot. Now, another scenario you can consider is to be able to send, to gather information from the user IDs. You can call a function called get teams members from the context to get information about the users that are part of a channel. And in this case, I'm retrieving some information from these users, such as the ID and name, and storing that in my table storage. So as you can see, it is empty for this partition key at least. And when I send this message to the bot, it will process the membership of this team and update the information in my storage account. So if I refresh, I should have my list of users, including their names, as well as the user ID, which can be used to initiate proactive one-on-one conversations as we did previously in the previous demo. And for the sake of the demo, I'm going to copy this object ID of the user MOD and use that to send messages for this user. So in this case, I have this route, which is basically going to try to retrieve a conversation ID from the table storage using this partition key, which is the Azure AD object ID of the user. And if it couldn't find it, will return no user. And if it finds, he will be able to continue the conversation with the user based on the conversation ID itself. And if not, it will get the user ID from the table we just uploaded, as we did previously. Build the conversation parameters for initiating the conversation with that user. And after sending the message, we'll insert the conversation ID in the table. So I'm gonna delete a previous record just to help this demo. And from Postman, I'm going to send the user ID of the object, Azure AD object ID I chose from the user emoji for this endpoint. And when it happens, the user should receive a proactive message and the Azure table storage should update with the conversation ID from this user. So if we refresh the table, we should have a new row, which in this case has the Azure AD object ID and the conversation ID, which can be used to continue conversations with the user. So if I call this endpoint again, what will happen is that the endpoint will retrieve the conversation ID and continue the conversation with that user rather than creating a new conversation ID reference. So as you can see, a new message was received and the proactive message was sent to the user. And this is the message that was received by the postman. Conversation continued. So that was how you can create a channel and user conversation from data, leveraging your own APIs to notify a channel or a user about a particular information. Now when it comes to proactive messages best practices, you should, whenever possible, store the channel and user data as fast as you can. So in this case, the best option would be the conversation update, which is triggered when the bot is installed for a user or a channel. And you could also use to retrieve channel information from the membership and the user IDs in case you need to send a proactive message to a user. You should plan for the bot permissions because if you want to send a proactive message to a user, the user needs to be aware of this bot, and that could be done in two ways. First, the user installing the bot directly, or the user being part of a team where the bot is installed. So those are the two possible ways to achieve that. If you want to promote your bot or application to users, you could leverage Teams app setup policies so that you will ping an application such as a bot, and the next time that policy takes action, the bot will automatically be installed to a user, and you can store the conversation update parameter. You should also plan for throttling. So there are limits when it comes to the amount of messages a bot can send in a particular channel or conversation. So you should plan for that. And the company communicator app template is a great example about how you should plan for throttling and delay sending new messages. And whenever possible, you should try to not be a spam, but let users know in advance that they will receive messages and even allow them to unsubscribe if applicable, so that your bot won't interrupt any working activities. You should also plan for security best practices, such as in case of APIs protecting your endpoints, your routes, auditing activities about who used that route and when to send what payload, and that generated which proactive messages. You should plan for also using environment variables to store any configuration needed and not hard code that in your bot activity handler itself. And in case your bot wants to be protected from different tenants, you can also retrieve and make sure that no activity is processed when it doesn't come from an authorized tenant. So that's sent with the context, which is sent to the bot, that you can leverage also to authorize or block bot from processing activity from that particular tenant. And also try to leverage as much as possible the bot samples, which the team did a great job to publish in GitHub. And also there are the app templates, which are open source, and you can have access to the entire code to even modify as needed. And two of which make a really good use of the concepts demonstrated here are the FAQ Plus and the Company Communicator. With that, thank you for watching this video, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share that in the comments below. Thank you.